Okay, yep. Yay, hi there, great and glorious. Nick Dutch here, yet again. Bit knackered, been working too hard, but never mind. I'm just going to talk briefly today about the idea of finding truth, because I had a guy who sent me a YouTube email saying, how do I find out what's true? And, you know, what is the method of finding truth? I replied back saying, you know, learn how to think rather than what to think. And then he emailed back saying, well, how do I do that? To which the answer is, of course, scientific thinking and reasoning. Now, I'm going to provide an example which you might not agree with, but this is a useful, like a vehicle or method for me to be able to explain what I'm talking about. I'm going to have a look at evolution and creation. Obviously, these are hot topics on YouTube. And I'm proposing that when we see either of these two models of the world as being true, either of them, we're making a major mistake intellectually. Now, as far as evolution is concerned, tons of evidence, tons of information going back through the fossil record, and yes, I personally would say that evolution is a very important truth about the way that life has appeared on the face of the planet. No, I don't believe that the planet is 6,000 years old. It's just daft to say that. I also think that the idea of an intelligent designer might also be false. Now, when something is stated as a fact, the fact that it is stated stops it from being an absolute, because it's a statement. When something is a statement of facts, it is not a fact. It is a point of argument. Now, what is argument? Argument is a means which humans use to try and weigh up different pieces of information and come closer to something that could possibly be more likely to be true. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when they think about science is that science deals in absolutes and gives people objective facts, which are 100% solid, 100% reliable, black and white, monochrome, you know, very easy to be able to say this is absolute truth, when that doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, I was flabbergasted in my first year of undergraduate study because I just spent one day just sitting down, drinking tons of coffee like I do, smoking my head off and just trying to think about what science is about. Science is about investigating into nature. It's not about turning around to anybody and saying that something is true. It's trying to work out what is most likely to be true under specific circumstances. So evolution has enough information and enough evidence to say that is most likely to be true under specific circumstances. But if someone is being a scientist, they would say, yes, that does appear to be true. We will accept that as a truth, and a very important truth as well. But we shouldn't rule out something else being or causing the effects of evolution, of humans appearing on the face of the planet, on the fact we got big brains, whatever. But it's equally wrong to say that this is God. It is God which has done it. Because we don't know. Sure, there are statements which say that this is true, that is true, the other is true. But because they're statements, they're not facts. Science is about finding out what's most likely to be true and stating them as a truth. And from building up a number of different truths over time, we can then get a more cohesive, more in-depth model of the world. So, the creationists have an argument with a truth, which is based upon text, and based upon a perspective of the world, which is within a culture of people. And therefore, it is a important truth. But it is not the truth, because there is no such thing as the truth. And science would agree that there is no such thing as the truth. Also, the evolutionists must look back at all their knowledge and be able to say, that is what appears to be true, based upon the evidence, based upon the proof. Alright, because proof is a stage in an academic argument from which conclusions can be drawn which are based upon or will become the basis of further argumentation. But the evolutionists can't say that there isn't a number of other factors that could possibly have created evolution. But also, the religious people can't say that evolution is a lie because there is the evidence there. Maybe at some time there'll be a wiser, more in-depth understanding as to what God is and what other factors, which might not even be God, which could have caused the phenomenon of evolution. So, remember this. If it's a statement of fact, it's not a fact. It's a statement. It's a point of view. And the process of growing in knowledge is through working out what seems to be most likely to be true under some circumstances, having a bit of doubt and thinking, well, maybe there's something else which could have created that effect. That's essentially all it's about. And, perpetually experimenting into nature, trying to find out what else could be true. Researching, reading more, studying more. Using the scientific method is about, when you're going through the learning of life, you're making mistakes all the time. Those mistakes are your experiments. And from them you learn what is right, what is wrong, what can be done, what can't be done, and so on and so forth. Now, you can do this through learning from other people, which is sometimes useful and sometimes not useful. You can do this through reading, which is sometimes useful and sometimes not useful. You can do it the introspective method through watching some forms of fiction to see whether you agree with or disagree with the arguments posed by different people. But more importantly, working out why you have a certain point of view which you think is right. Because if you take your point of view and you accept that as being the truth or the most reliable truth, then you're making a big mistake. Because there's always more to learn and more to grow from. Alright, this is just a very brief synopsis. I might do a whole series on learning, on growth, on learning more about how to think. But just remember that what is a scientific process? You have an experiment under specific circumstances. You make an analysis of what those circumstances are. Then you put in another factor to see how that factor affects the whole clean room of the experiment. Then you get a result. You then work out whether that result was the result of you putting this extra factor into play, or whether a number of other factors could be involved. Now, you don't know what other factors could be involved unless you've done much more in the way of research, thinking, thought, reading, okay? Just to try and work out what else can be happening there. And then once you've got your results, then you can draw some conclusions. And yes, you will have some proof, but the word proof is not an absolute, doesn't state an absolute fact. Nothing in science is an absolute fact. That's a big mistake that you've got to, you've got to overcome that thinking that, there are absolutes. There aren't any. No natural science absolutes, no physical absolutes. Just what seems to be most likely to be true, so we can build a workable model of how this world appears to work so that we can function as beings in it. Okay. Well, that's all I'm going to say for now. Good fortune. God bless. Look after yourself. Bye for now.